Community Outreach Summit. This is the second summit on the topic of gangs. And there are a number of different reasons why we felt like we needed to address this topic again. Before I go into the logistics of that, I want to introduce a few people who are here in the audience. I do notice that there are some residents who have been here for a number of years, but there are also some residents that just moved here to the island. So I'd like to bring your attention to a few folks, if I may. First and foremost, I'd like to introduce you to Police Officer Manny Diaz from the 114th Precinct. He is the newly assigned police officer here on Roosevelt Island from the 114. You will see him on the island from time to time. Feel free to introduce yourself to him after the presentation. I'd also like to acknowledge Charlie DeFino, who heads up our youth center, sitting in the back. Charlie, would you stand up for a second, Charlie? Of course, the old-timers know who Charlie is, but some of the newer residents might not. Also, Erin Feely-Nahum is sitting in the back. She chairs the Public Safety Committee for the Roosevelt Island Residents Association. Would you please stand? And we also have Dr. Sal Ferreira, who is in charge of the Child Legacy School and also newly elected to the REAC board. Sal, would you please stand and be acknowledged? Again, thank you all for coming to this presentation. Since my arrival on Roosevelt Island, I felt it necessary to take a proactive approach in communicating with the residents and business owners here on the island. We've discussed a plethora of different topics, some of which are more prevalent and more important than others. And I feel like it's our job as the Public Safety Department to try to share as much information as we can with the residents and business owners here on the island so that folks can be informed of what's going on. We've hosted a summit on youth. We've hosted a previous summit on gangs. We've hosted a summit on crime prevention for our seniors, just to name a few. We will continue to do so that we can do our best to make sure that everyone gets as much information as they can. I'm sure during the presentation you will have some questions. I would ask that you write those questions down and save them for the question and answer part of this program. I also want to reiterate to some folks that are here with children that this is an adult presentation. I reiterate, this is an adult presentation. There will be some graphic things that you will see on the screen and some language that we really did not want the children to hear, but we do understand that folks have to come out with their children, so just be mindful of that. We don't want you to be caught off guard with some of the language and some of the graphics that you will see in this presentation. There's a reason why the presentation is the way it is, and that's because we need to give you all of the information, not some of the information, so that you are not misled in any way, shape, or form. This particular summit is going to answer some questions, hopefully. Questions such as, do we have a gang issue here on Roosevelt Island? Do we have a gang problem? Do you think your child or neighbor is in a gang? What are the indicators your child may be being recruited by a gang? Come on in, please, come on in. Is your child associating with gang members? How can that affect your child? What is gang graffiti? And of course, many other topics that surround this very important topic. On the table, adjacent to the refreshments, you will see a 4-page, which is 2 pages back to back. It's an informational guide that I put together for you, which gives you a lot of information that you will see in the presentation, but that you could take with you, because unfortunately there are a lot more residents that are not able to attend this particular summit, and they're going to ask you, did you go to the summit? What was spoken about? Can you give me some ideas of what they talked about at that particular informational summit? And you could have some materials to be able to refer to. I also have something that's a part of our being proactive in the community, and that's a safety guide that I put together I would like everyone to take a copy of this home. I didn't want anybody to come up and get them early because it's a really well put together booklet, and I didn't want your attention to be focused on the booklet more so than the presentation. So please, afterwards, do not leave. I will have officers that will be standing up here giving everybody one copy. So please take it with you. And for those people who were not able to make the presentation, who ask you, hey, where did you get that? Have them come into public safety and we will give one to them as well. As some of you know, 2 days ago we had a shooting in Roosevelt Landings. It was an isolated incident. This neighborhood is still the safest neighborhood, we believe, in at least the borough of Queens, as far as crime statistics go from the NYPD. It does not mean that this is turning into a bad neighborhood, but what it does is it sends a message to you folks that live here that reminds you you still live in New York City. And what we want you to take from not only this summit, but from the proactive efforts that we make is that we want the residents here to feel safe. The Roosevelt Island Public Safety Department is manned by 37 uniformed officers that work 3 shifts, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And we are here to make sure that you feel safe. Just to give you some background information on that particular shooting, it was isolated. It was not random in nature. The victim was not seriously injured. The victim suffered 2 superficial wounds, and the perpetrators are known to the victim, and the victim was known to the perpetrators. So that gives you a little bit of an idea as to the dynamics of that particular incident. But that particular incident isn't the only incident that we've had here on the island. Some of you can recall, or some of you that came to our commendation ceremony, our officers apprehended a suspect in possession of a firearm about a year ago. There have been a series of fights and assaults here on the island that we attribute to gang-related activity. There is a gang here on the island that we know of, an organized gang set called BGM, or Been Getting Money. Some of you that may have heard that moniker may think it's fake, may think it's phony. We believe that it has legs. Part of our efforts is to try and make sure that activity which is attributed to gangs stays away from this island. We in law enforcement are never, ever, ever going to thwart out all criminal activity, nor are we going to be able to thwart out all gang activity. But what our main focus here on the island is to make sure that it's not happening here. Okay, if it happens someplace else, that's someone else's job to deal with. Our efforts are going to be concentrated on being proactive for you residents and business owners and workers here on the island to make sure that you feel safe. And we're going to continue to have these summits to give you information. We have a youth officer that is assigned from our department that interacts with the children. She works a split shift. First part of her shift, she spends time at the schools. Second part of her shift, she spends time walking the island and also popping her head into the youth center. Our island also has a youth center that is part of the solution. The youth center is charged with creating and operating structured programs. That's the key to this particular issue. Kids who join gangs don't have much structure in their idle time. What does that mean? Well, some of them go to school, and then after school, they have nothing to do. Some of them don't play sports, they're not engaged in music, and they're not engaged in any of the arts, so they don't really have much to do after school, and with that idle time, they assimilate to a group of people who are not necessarily looking out for their best interests. They don't know it per se, but with the recruiting process involved in recruiting young kids into gangs, and we mean males and females, those of you who have daughters or have neighbors or good friends that have daughters, it's males and females, folks, not just the males. And what happens is they need a sense of belonging, and so they decide they're going to assimilate to the gang. I'm not going to go much more into that because I've brought the perfect expert here. I know this gentleman for about 17 years. I first went to one of his lectures when I was a uniformed officer assigned to a youth unit. I got promoted and was assigned to the youth division and had the opportunity to bring him back to my command to do a presentation, one for the adults and then a separate one for the kids, 2 different presentations. We've maintained that relationship, and when I arrived here, I decided I needed to bring him here, and he was here in 2009, and he's back again this year. The reason I bring him by is because I believe he's the best. I have a lot of experience in gangs. I was part of a gang liaison unit in my former employment, and this guy knows his stuff. So a small introduction is warranted, although he does not need an introduction, but he goes by Cook. His name is Ron Cook Barrett. He's been involved in inner city youth for over 20 years. He was hired by the City of Albany, New York's Department of Youth and Workforce Services, and implemented the gang prevention program, which is recognized by the National Gang Crime Research Center in Chicago, Illinois, as an exemplary program. He is now the gang prevention specialist with the City of Albany and has conferences and is the keynote speaker in several conferences, not only in this country, but also Canada. I don't know if there are any other countries that you're speaking at that I haven't covered, but without further ado, I want to introduce to you, and it's my pleasure to introduce to you, Ron Cook Barrett.